Hey y'all, it's Olivia of AB Reads, and I'm here to talk about all of the things that I read in June and July. So typically I read enough in a month that I kind of need to dedicate one video to it, but not the case for June and July because I had gotten sick and then my boyfriend was here for a month. So really all I read during like those times were thrillers on audiobook during my commute, and I don't necessarily have like a ton to say on them, but did want to talk about some of the books that I read and can give some recommendations on if you should or shouldn't read some of the thrillers that I read this month. So let's just go ahead and start with June. So in June I read 7 books, which isn't too bad. The first book that I read that month was the so-called book club pick of the month, which was The Membranes by Ta-Wei. And if you're not familiar with my so-called book club, I think I pronounced it, I think that's the name. It's the book club that is only 90s lit, started by Pastori Time. Right now it's on a hiatus, but there's definitely been some highs and lows from the picks over there, and this is definitely the highest high. Totally recommend. This is maybe the best sci-fi book that I've ever read. It's pretty thin. It's written by a Taiwanese author in like the early 90s. First published in 96. It feels so modern in both the ideas and the writing. I think the translation is from last year, so I'm not sure if like the translation is what makes it feel so modern, but yeah, this feels like it could have been written today. But just like in terms of the like actual sci-fi plot that's going on is like super interesting. That it's this post-apocalyptic world where we live under the water now. Our main character, Momo, is like a skincare specialist and does like the most sought after skin procedures on the wealthy people of her underwater city. A lot about sexuality and gender and culture. It definitely goes in a direction that the the plot pushes forward, and so it's both very thoughtful but also well paced, and was more actiony than not actiony, but just the pace of it, that it was less like brooding and more plot driven than I expected, but that goes along with like saying that it feels very like modern. But yeah, this is probably my favorite sci-fi book that I've ever read, which I think says a lot about it. So this is probably gonna be the best book that I've read. So spoiler, yeah, I think this is the best book that I read in both June and July. So off to a swimming start. The next book that I read was Rosemary's Baby by Levin. I think people know the story of Rosemary's Baby. I have not seen the movie yet. I started it at one point and then I don't remember ever finishing it. But if you don't know the story of Rosemary's Baby, there's a couple who move into like an apartment complex, and there are weird goings on. She's pregnant. She starts to like feel sick while she's pregnant, and the doctor who's taking care of her doesn't seem to be acknowledging the fact that she's, you know, not feeling well and that she's getting actively worse. And he's like, "Oh, it'll pass. Don't even worry about it." So it's a very like believe women moment, but really loved this, like more so than I thought I would. Like, not that I didn't think I would like it, but it's definitely like a recommend, like if you're like, oh, I've seen the movie, or you know, like just like something new that you're like, oh, I'll eventually read it. I think go ahead and pick it up. It's, I read it on audiobook, but I think it was a pretty fast read even on there. So add Rosemary's Baby to your list if you want like a spooky pregnancy story, spooky urban story. I like, you know, stories that are like urban and like in apartment buildings, and I don't know, because it's almost like you're like trapped because you live there. So other things that are like that, yeah, let me know what else you're thinking. The next book that I read in June was Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. In May, I read The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware, and I was pleasantly surprised. I know she's like a very popular thriller writer, and I feel like I've seen like pretty mixed reviews of her books, but I know that people really love Turn of the Key, and I really liked Woman in Cabin 10, which was about a like a disappearance on, or a murder on a cruise ship in Scandinavia. So I think that that's a little bit different, that it's like a cruise, but it's like a tiny yacht kind of cruise and in like a cold environment rather than like beachy summery vibes. But I think that both of these were like kind of like the perfect entertaining level thriller for me, especially like The Woman in Cabin 10. But I did like Turn of the Key as well. Turn of the Key follows a woman who has started like nannying at this smart house, and smart things unveil from there. So it's all about like these kids do not really like her, that it seems like there's been a string of nannies who have left very quickly. The house seems to be haunted. So it's like figuring out like what's going on. Like, is this house like just like haunted by ghosts? Is there something weird about the smart house? You know, why have all the nannies been leaving? And just everything from there. The dad seems to be like a little bit of a creep. So maybe like he was just like coming on to people and that's why they left. So yeah, it wasn't as strong for me as The Woman in Cabin 10, but I think if you are going into, if you're just like, I just want a thriller, I just want to like put my mind on, you know, that it's not gonna have anything like too dark or explicit in it. It's just kind of fun, like a a nice like beach read kind of thriller. So yeah, read Turn of the Key. Don't read Turn of the Key. I think that's kind of like, you can go either way. The next book that I read was a thriller novella that I read on Scribd called White Ibis. And this was about a woman who becomes obsessed with like this woman at her yoga studio, at her Pilates studio. It's been like 2 months now, so give me a break. And that she's like kind of changing her life to keep running into her and ingratiate herself with her. And it's, yeah, it's a novella, so things happen pretty quickly. She has like a boyfriend who's kind of just like doesn't really seem like interested or interesting, and she's just kind of like tired with her life and becoming like obsessed with this woman. And so just like it spirals out of control. But I thought it was fun. It's interesting because this author, like looking at her like Goodreads page, because I'd never heard anyone talk about this, I just kind of like found it scrolling through Scribd, like everything else she writes are like erotic romance novels, and this was like a very tactfully done thriller story that like I wouldn't have I couldn't have guessed that she was like primarily a romance author. I probably won't read any of those, but this one was a good time for sure. The next book that I read was also a novella, also based off of my interest in the movie, was The V by Nikolai Gogol. And this is a story about a priest who has to like pray over like a witch's body for days, and weird things happen every night, and things eventually also spiral there. But I had originally been interested in this just because I like the movie, and it's almost like you're reading or watching it for like just that payoff at the end for both of them. But I think the payoff's pretty good in a way that I could recommend either the movie or the book. But the movie is like very visually captivating, not necessarily the most like thrilling story, but if you're looking for something to kind of like be mood ambiance, this movie might be the trick. The next June read that I had was Tastes Like Candy by Ivy Tholen. This was recommended to me, highly recommended by Kelsey of Slime and Slashers, and this is like a carnival slasher story. It's about these high school students who are doing kind of like their end of the year graduation party, a senior scavenger hunt, and usually it's like at the school, but for whatever reason they're hosting it at this like carnival that's open in their city every year. And there's, you know, kind of like different high school girl archetypes. There's, you know, our main character is a musician. There's a girl who's an influencer and is like popular on YouTube, and there's like the stoners, and there's just like different archetypes. I think that this is kind of exactly what you think it's gonna be or want it to be going in. Like if you're just like wanting a fun slasher that's set at a carnival, knowing that it is like high school students, and I think does kind of read as high school students. Questionable accuracy around drug use in this, that the portrayal of marijuana in this doesn't quite add up, but you know, we can all suspend our our disbelief. And yeah, this was really fun. I read it really quickly. I love this genre. Like, I need to read more stuff that's set at a carnival. It kind of reminded me of Hellfest, which I also think is like, dare I say, underrated. Like, it's just fun. And has like some of, I think I read this like in the same week that I watched the movie Hellfest, and it has like some of the same kills, which is interesting. So you could definitely, if you were planning to read some carnival stuff or wanted, you know, to theme some reading with a movie, Tastes Like Candy and Hellfest would be a good choice. But yeah, I recommend this. This is, it was fun. I think that's what it's aiming to be, is fun. I don't think that, you know, like I got a lot out of like the teen drama angle of it, but I wasn't reading it for that. So yeah, it did exactly what I wanted it to do, and I would read from this author again. And also this cover is gorgeous, and like it appears to be like completely self-published, which is pretty cool. But yeah, Tastes Like Candy. The last book that I read in June was The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. I've heard this being recommended as like Peter Swanson's best thriller, so it's just the one I started with. I've kind of been going through, was kind of in a real thriller phase, and it's what I sometimes like prefer to listen to on an audiobook, especially for like my commutes, just because it makes it more entertaining. The Kind Worth Killing is about a man who is telling this random woman at an airport that his wife's cheating on him, and she's like, "You should kill your wife," and he's like, "Yeah, but what if?" And so then they decide to kill his wife. And honestly, I can't even remember what actually ends up happening, but it was good. There's you know, intertwining stories, and I don't know, it was entertaining. But yeah, truly just gathering bits and pieces. But like I said, this was almost like 2 months ago now that I read this, and A lot has happened since then, so forgive me. Would I recommend this? Yes. Is that crazy that I cannot tell you what it was about but recommend it? Yes. I think if you're going into it wanting like a strangers on the train vibe, you're gonna get it. If you're looking for the best thriller ever and you're only gonna read one thriller this year, would I pick this one? No. But if you want something to add into the mix, this one's fine. And then in July, I read 6 books and started off with No Exit by Taylor Adams. No Exit is also a very popular thriller, and it's about a woman who's driving through Colorado, gets snowed in at a random like rest stop out in the middle of nowhere, and there's like 5 other people that are stuck at this rest stop, and she goes outside, she can't get a cell phone signal, the whole 9 yards, and then she sees a little girl's hand on a van, and she realizes that one of these people that are at the rest stop with her like abducted a child, and for whatever reason she doesn't think it would be like a good plan to like tell everyone there that there's a child stuck in a van. She's like trying to like, I don't understand. I didn't fully understand the logic of like why she didn't just like first, like right off the bat, tell everyone there was like a child in this van. She wants to like free her without involving anyone because she thinks it's gonna like up the level of violence. But it's like, you're stuck at a rest stop. There's only so much like evasion you can do. Honestly, not my favorite. I was definitely like following the story throughout and like wanted to see where it went, but it didn't do a lot for me. For some reason I thought Taylor Adams was a woman Taylor, and I think that, you know, that's kind of like written into the story, is that there's like a man named Leslie, and he's like, no, it's a boy's name too. And I'm like, are you just self-conscious about this, that you have like a ambiguous name? But like how he wrote women characters was like questionable, not like overly sexualized. I don't remember what it was, but it was just like they didn't seem very smart, and I don't know, it just like, it was fine, but I probably wouldn't recommend it, especially over, you know, whenever there's such a array of thrillers to choose from. It didn't do a lot for me, and the ending did not do a lot for me, so a pass. Another very, very popular thriller up next. I'm hoping that like I will eventually have covered the modern canon of thrillers that everyone has read and recommends, and then be able to like more deeply dive into new things. But the next one that I read was Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris, and this is the story of a woman who is trapped in an abusive relationship, but it's not just, but it looks perfect from the outside. It's not like a domestic abuse thing, like this guy's just like, it was never like supposed to be like a real relationship. He's like trapped her, and then there's just like this cat and mouse game of like her trying to escape, and then like this like long dormant period of her like playing his game while she's like figuring out how to escape from a guy who seems to be anticipating everything and is like very, very devious and evil. So it's not like it's not a domestic abuse story, which is what I thought whenever I first heard about it. But then whenever I heard someone say it's not that kind of story, and then there's like this like group of friends around her, and the women seem to be like attuned to like, you know, something's a little bit off here. I really thought the story was well done, that the guy was so evil and devious, and it's like, it was interesting to see the ways that he was evil. The main character is actually smart, and yeah, it's just like odd to see like how the relationship spiraled. So you have like both this like modern current day timeline, and then like this like backwards like timeline of like how she first like got romanced, and like eventually, like, you know, they intertwine and you're all caught up, but seeing the difference is wild. So Behind Closed Doors is good. Yeah. The next thriller, yeah, this was like a thriller month. This is whenever my boyfriend was here, and so it's like I basically only read audiobooks on my commute, and that's all all I read for July. So the next one was actually one that I read whenever I was driving back our road trip from Chicago, and it was Hostage by Clare Mackintosh. Clare, I don't know why I pronounced that so weird. Mackintosh, Clare Mackintosh. And this is about an airline. They don't call them stewardess in this. They have like a new term for whatever the cabin help is. She has a daughter who they adopted and is kind of like estranged from her husband now because her husband seems to be like cheating on her or into some kind of shady stuff. And their adopted daughter has like a lot of needs because she was neglected whenever she was born. And now our main character is working as cabin help, has a previous history of like going to pilot school, and quit under unknown circumstances because she was like had anxiety. And the current situation is that she has been picked, or gets herself picked, to be on the first nonstop flight from London to Sydney. And this is a new thriller. I think it came out last year, but on the flight she sees like these things from her daughter, like a picture of her daughter at school, and then she eventually gets like a hostage letter that's like, if you don't help us take this plane hostage, then, you know, we're gonna kill your family. And so she does help them take the plane hostage, and then like you just like figure out who it is that's doing it, why they're doing it, how they're going to be like able to outsmart them in order to not die by like their, I don't want to, you know, spoil like who it is or anything yet, but it definitely like has like updating storylines. And in the meantime, we also have this like storyline about like what's happening with like her husband and her child at the same time. But it was like pretty tense throughout, and it was like very elegantly written. I would definitely read more books by this author, but I think it was different in tone to the other thrillers that I read this month, that it was more procedural and felt very British, if that makes sense, if that gives any clue as to like, it was like less salacious, I guess, and more studied. I saw people hated the ending, but I kind of liked it. I thought it was, you know, interesting. I thought it was, you know, what they could have done with the story. There's only so many ways that a plane being held hostage story can end, although I saw that there was other thrillers in that genre released in the same year. So it's interesting. It's like, how many different ways can you write a plane hostage story? Because it's like either the plane crashes at the end, or, you know, somehow they get saved. So and if they get saved, then it's like, where does the rest of the tension of the story go? So I do want to look at those two, but I recommend this one. It was yeah, it was elegant and what I wanted from it. This was the next book from July, Below by Laurel Hightower. I've seen this one really well received, and I liked it as well. It's a story about this woman. She's driving alone through a snowstorm in West Virginia, and she is having like weird electrical problems, weird connection problems with her phone. She thinks she sees like something weird on the side of the road, and then she like stops at a diner and meets up with this truck driver guy, and she's like being very like protective, but he's like, you know, like, let me just give you my radio, that way we can talk to each other on the road. And then whenever they're driving, that cuts out, and he's like drives off of a bridge, and I think you can tell that this is like a cryptid story from even the cover, and it's about just like her trying to like survive this night whenever she's like hearing things, seeing things, isn't sure about like what is fully real, and is also like having, you know, personal things that she's progressing through. It's a short read, but I found it really entertaining and well paced. I gave it 3 stars. I think has kind of like an X-Files vibe, which I think is understandable given the subject matter. But if you're looking for like a short cryptid story, then this is, I think, maybe a good choice for you. The last physical book that I read in July was Local Girl Missing by Clare Douglas. I honestly don't have a lot to say about this. I thought it was extremely boring. I cannot believe it's this long. It's about 2 boring British women who grew up together and were best friends. One moves away, then comes back, and wow, you know, like their dynamic has changed a little bit. They're both extremely attractive to everyone around them, but in different ways, and they're both like self-conscious about the ways that they're attractive to different people. There's like 10 different romantic connections. Like if there's a character in this book that they have a romantic connection, and there was like no tension or anything interesting in the mystery, and I think you know exactly what's going to happen from this one is a pass. Just not good. I don't I read this like the first day that my boyfriend was gone, and I was just like, you know what, I'm not gonna enjoy anything I read right now, and I have this physical book, so I might as well just like have that cathartic moment of reading something that I'm disliking, because I'm also just like in a poor mood overall. So like if I read something good right now, I wouldn't appreciate it, but I have to keep my mind busy somehow, so a bad book was perfect. So starts mediocre and gets steadily worse throughout, but not in an interesting way. Please do not misunderstand me. This book is boring and not good. The last book that I read in July was Just One Look by Lindsay Cameron. This was kind of blurbed as like a female you, and was it that? No, not quite. It's about a disgraced lawyer who is now working as like a temp in a new law firm, and she does become like obsessed with like this lawyer that's at the law firm, and she has like no connections with, but her job is to read through emails to pull out like certain emails for like a case or something, and for some reason like all of his emails get put into her folder. Like becomes obsessed with like him and his wife, and then she's like, wait, I think they're separated, and then is like puts herself in a position to be romantically involved with him. So it is interesting, I guess, and like how that works out, but it's not like she did like, I don't think it's like a female you, because there's not really like any like stalking or sleuth work that she's doing. It's just like she follows them on Instagram and reads all of his emails that give her all the information she needs. But I thought it was entertaining. Did it blow my mind in any way? No, but it is entertaining, and I do like hearing from, I like being in the POV of someone that I don't like and who is not very interesting. She has like a friend at work who is like way more interesting and seems interested in her, and so it's like, is that believable? No, because she doesn't seem to be like offering a lot to the people around her. But it is entertaining. So that sounds like I'm talking very negatively about it, but it was fun, and it's set in New York, which I always love stories set in big cities and thrillers set in big cities, because I just like get a lot of FOMO that I don't live in that environment. So if you're looking for another thriller, then Just One Look, I think, is one that I haven't heard anyone talk about, but is entertaining. And I think if you like you, then you might like this, but I just like wouldn't expect the same level of like you-ness. Like it's not as like dark or stalky, or like she is obsessed with this guy, but it's not as creepy as in You. Those are all the books that I read in June and July. This ended up being, I guess, decently long. My biggest recommends of the 2 months would be The Membranes, Rosemary's Baby. Only a couple flops, only one major flop. But yeah, if you've read any of these, or yeah, if you have any more recommendations that are like New York City thrillers and horror, or like just like big city, like I just like the like Candyman's in Chicago, like I just love that like very like dense setting. I also like seeing like rich people in thrillers. I don't know, what does that say about me? But that's everything for me today, so I will talk to y'all soon. Bye.